HSBC found itself in a global storm yesterday after the disclosure of its Geneva bank dealing with clients linked to tax evasion and other criminal activities. I'm now joined by John Ivinson of Akin, Gump, Strauss, Hauer and Feld. Welcome.
Thank you.
So how did this information become public and why is it in the press now?
It's actually a very old story. This data was actually stolen by an employee of the bank in 2007. He fled Switzerland because he was going to be prosecuted for breaching banking secrecy. He fled to France, and then when the French discovered what he had, they refused to send him back to Switzerland to stand trial and decided to compile a list of the names and send them to all of the governments whose citizens had been allegedly hiding money in Switzerland. So it's an old story. I think the reason it's in the news now is because these names have actually found their way into the press. We're not sure how, but the press now have the names, account numbers and details of how much was in them.
And what are the implications of this for the Swiss private banking industry?
I think they're not very significant anymore because it's an old story. Really, this and the UBS case are very much in the past. The Swiss banks are now as heavily regulated, if not more so, than any others. The system has been completely cleaned up. So I really think it's sort of unwelcome publicity, but nothing more than that, because the cleanup process started back in 2007, 2008, has continued to date. And so for Switzerland as a whole, it's a very different environment now. The government signed up to exchange of information provisions with other governments. So I think the world has moved on. The press haven't caught up yet.
And what can people affected by this do?
Well, I think there's a real unfairness for people because it's so long ago and because there's no differentiation as to who's on the list. There are people on the list who've done nothing wrong. They just happen to have an account in Switzerland and that was perfectly legal in the countries in which they lived. Other people have, been caught, have paid the money, paid their penalties and fines and moved on. And for the press now to be hounding them and naming them doesn't seem to me to be entirely fair. And it's ironic that a lot of the newspapers involved in this are the very newspapers who are very keen to protect people's civil rights when it involves other crimes such as terrorism, but when it comes to tax evasion, it seems there's a different standard. So I think people can try and sue, but their main action is probably against the bank.
And is it likely these types of scandals will continue to happen?
I think in Switzerland, no. I think the only dirty laundry to come out will be from the past. As I say, the pre-2007, 2008 period, I think it's possible, but going forward, I think it's unlikely. It may well be that in other countries that haven't cleaned up their act, there could be more to come. But I think for Switzerland, what will happen is there'll be echoes from the past to the extent they fall into the hands of the press, but I don't see any repeat of this kind of behaviour, and certainly the infrastructure is there for it not to happen.
They've learnt their lesson from last time.
They have.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. That's
all from Jonathan and myself for now. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to keep clicking back to Disclosing TV. Bye for now.